When I met Luella for the first time, she was well into her 90s. But that visit and every visit thereafter, she hounded me with a single question. Pastor, tell me what heaven is going to be like. Now, this is a 20-something-year-old pastor, fresh out of seminary, loaded with all kinds of information, just ready to impart on people. But what heaven was like was not one of those things I was versed in. I did my best to reassure that she would be with God, with Jesus, with family, that it would be okay, a place of peace and rest. That didn't work. She wanted details. I tried with integrity to use the biblical material to paint a general picture of what I understood it to be saying about what heaven would be like, a place of great feasting and beauty, singing. That didn't work either. She wanted more details. Month after month, year after year, every visit was the same thing. Pastor, tell me about heaven. And I never could satisfy her. Fast forward a number of years. She's turned 100. She's had major surgery with major complications. It's not looking good. I go to the hospital and sit with her granddaughter. The hour has come. There is no doubt. The signs are all there. The doctors, the nurses, all of them say the same thing. It's just a matter of time. And yet, as we sat there, Luella was in torment. Not so much physically, but emotionally. You could see it on her face. And I felt guiltier and guiltier every passing moment. I had not done my job. She wanted to know what heaven was like before she got there. Now she's fighting going. Eventually, I needed to go. I sat in the hospital parking lot in the car, almost in tears. I had failed as a pastor. What good was I? If only there was somebody that could talk to her with authority, that knew what heaven was like, that could talk to her on her terms. And then, almost in desperation, I started talking to my great Aunt Flora. Aunt Flora had lived to 101. If anybody could convince her what heaven was like, I think my Aunt Flora could do it. And so I said, Aunt Flora, if you're not busy this afternoon, can you just swing by and visit Luella in the hospital? She's having a rough go of it. Could you give her a good picture of heaven? Maybe help her home. When I got home, the phone was ringing. It was Luella's granddaughter. Somewhere as I traveled I-80, Luella had died peacefully. It was over. I'll never know if my Aunt Flora really visited her or not. But she received the reassurance she needed. We all need reassurance of the promises God made to us. Even somebody like Abraham struggles with it. God has promised him a land and to be the father of a great nation, and yet, in his own estimation, he was as good as dead, and his wife Sarah was well beyond childbearing years, and there was no offspring, no ancestors. And at the rate it was going, it looked like Eliezer of Damascus, some shoestring cousin, servant, whatever, was going to inherit it all. So much for your promises, God. Let's get real. God's reply is, Abe, I got this one. Will you chill? Come on outside with me. And God takes him outside and shows him all the stars in the heaven. He says, so shall your descendants be, as numerous as the stars in heaven and the sands on the earth beneath. I promise. Now, if we read about Abraham in the New Testament, we get a very beautiful picture of this man of faith. And so we think that after God has reassured him that everything's going to be okay. But good old Abe knows better. He's still worried. And so was Sarah. And so between the two of them, they cook up this scheme. He will sleep with Sarah's handmaid, Hagar, and perhaps she can produce an offspring. And then everything will be okay. They'll be off and running. Abraham does. There is a child. And that's when everything goes dreadfully wrong. As we would expect, given those kind of dynamics. It almost tears Abraham and Sarah apart. Jealousy, envy, you name it. In the end, God has the last laugh, literally. Sarah gets pregnant, has a child, names it Yitzhak, the child of laughter. God's last laugh. And the rest is history. Do not be afraid, Abe. I got this one. Do not be afraid. I've got this one. We too live in uncertain times. We've heard the promises, but reality is scary right now. We've kind of weathered COVID, I think, but we never know. There's monkeypox on the horizon. But what will be the lasting effects of COVID, really? Not just physically, but emotionally, socially. What kind of an impact is that pandemic going to have on us in the long term? I mean, we've already seen huge changes in the way we do business, in the way we act in public, in the way we socialize, the decisions we make. What's the long-term effects? It's kind of scary. We also find ourselves in the midst of a political divide unlike one we have seen for most of us in our lifetimes. Such bitter, at times even violent disagreement. We watch political footballs get kicked back and forth, changing sides. It's a mess. Socially, we're a mess. I hear people do and say things I never would have dreamed from them. And then we talk about the church. Life in the church is scary these days for many of us. What will it be like? What's the future hold? Right now, prognosticators are saying we'll be lucky if we get 50% of those that were worshiping pre-COVID back. And so far, those statistics have held pretty true across the nation, across all denominations. What will the future of the church be? It's a question I get when I'm out visiting congregations these days. Pastor Jake, tell us, how do we fix the church? How do we get more kids in church? I smile, say, that's easy. You have more children. They all look around the table. Most of them are in their 70s or 80s. And they laugh. You're funny, Pastor. And then I tell them the story of Abraham and Sarah. And I get a deer in the headlight look. I said, yeah, this isn't about you. It's about what God's going to do. And you better be careful what you wish for. Because God's got this one. And it may not look the way we want to see it. But God's got it in the bag. It has always been the Father's good pleasure to give us the kingdom. That's the promise. It was the promise made to us in our baptisms. It's the promise that gathers us together as the faithful. It's the promise of Holy Communion. That God will be with us, even as he is intimately with us now in the present. He's got this one. But it is so hard to believe. Believing just goes counter to this rational world we live in, because it requires faith in what we cannot see. I was complaining to my mom the other day about wondering if I was ever going to be able to retire. I told her I was off to see the financial advisor to see what my financial picture was going to look like. She fired back. She said, "You'll never have enough money to retire. So just relax. God will take care of you. He's got this one." Yeah, God's got this one. He surrounds us with a great cloud of witnesses to remind us. He gathers us around the waters of our baptism to remind us. He brings us to his table that we may taste the promise, a reminder, a foretaste of what is yet to come. We need not worry, O little flock, for it is the Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. So chill. God's got this one. Amen.